Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordyn. This is Krissa. We're here to start a new reading vlog. Hi cutie. Where I'm going to read books that I heard of through Booktubers. That's a pretty vague description, but basically I just have books that are on my TBR that I want to read. I wanted to group them somehow, and this is how we're gonna do it. Two of the books are books that Booktubers loved, and I think I'm also going to love.
I love you.
And then two of the books are actually books that Booktubers hated, but I still think I'm going to love.
I'm going to love you.
I love you, sweetie.
I love you.
So let's talk about them. The first book that I will be reading for this video is called Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. This is a historical fiction book. I don't know a lot about the plot. All I know is that Kat from Cat Chats loved this book. And out of the first like 6 or 7 months of the year, this is her favorite book so far. So I was like, okay, sold. I think it's emotional. I think it's hard-hitting. And typically hard-hitting emotional historical fictions work for me, especially because Kat is someone who typically reads like thriller horror books. I found it interesting that a historical fiction is the genre of book that is her favorite so far this year. So I'm just intrigued to know why. And I'm hoping that I end up enjoying it as much as she did. The second book that I want to read is Any Man by Amber Tamblin. This book I originally heard of through Elizabeth at Reading Riley. She read this book and first she was talking about it on Instagram. She was like, I'm really liking this. I didn't know this author wrote books because she is an actress. I know her from The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, but apparently she also writes poetry and novels. As far as I understand, this book is about sexual assault, but specifically men who are being sexually assaulted by a woman who's trying to like prove a point or send a message or get justice or something. I don't really know the background behind it, but it sounds like because it is swapped from the normal sexual assault gender stereotypes, I think it brings to light some things that are not typically thought of or addressed when talking about sexual assault. She gave this one 5 stars, and as soon as she did that, I said, yes, I want to read that. So now getting into the books that I want to read that Booktubers have hated, but I still think I'm gonna like. The first one is The Girl in 6E by A.R. Torre. I believe this is a thriller about a cam girl who doesn't let herself leave her house or apartment because she will kill people. Don't really know much more than that. The reason I want to read this is because Jacqueline from the channel Jacqueline did not like this book. And it's funny because Jacqueline and I have almost opposite tastes when it comes to thrillers. Some of her favorite tropes are things that I absolutely hate, like memory loss is one that comes to mind, and then vice versa. Things she hates in thrillers are some of my favorites. Like at the end of a mystery when the villain goes off on a monologue about why they did what they did and exactly how they did it. She hates that. I love that. And she actually made a whole video about thrillers she hates. And I watched that video. Not only did I enjoy all of the ones that she mentioned that I have already read, but then I added basically the rest of the books that I hadn't already read to my TBR. This was one of them. I believe this one has that like villainous monologue at the end of it. And other than Jacqueline not liking this book, I've actually seen some good reviews and heard some of my friends say that they do like this book. So that gives me hope that I can enjoy this thriller, even though Jacqueline did not. And then the last book I have on my list is a major wild card. I'm gonna go with Whispers and the Roars by Webster, kind of on a whim. Kayla from Books and Lava recently read this book. She went into it not knowing really at all what it was or what it was about or what to expect from it, and she ended up hating it. It sounds like this is a romance book with really dark themes and topics, potentially some twists in there, and Kayla did not like it. The reason I think I'm going to like this is because I live for cheap twists. I love twists and turns and reveals no matter the genre. I just eat it up if it's something I couldn't predict, didn't see coming. And I think that's the part she didn't like about this book. And I guess because I've kind of been getting into my romance era lately, I'm hoping the romance also works for me, but really I'm just in it for the twist. I want to find out if dark, twisted romances are something I could potentially like in the future. And so I'm gonna give this one a try even though Kayla hated it. So those are the 4 books I'm going to read for this video. Very different in tone and vibe and honestly expectations. I don't know where my ratings are actually going to end up, but I think it's gonna be fun to read these books and compare my thoughts to the people who I originally heard of these books through. I have actually already started the first book. I've started Betty. This is the longest one and the writing is very small on the pages. So I knew this one was going to take me the longest to get through, so I wanted to knock it out first. And I'm already about 100 pages into this book, and so far it's quite slow. This book so far is reminding me a lot of two memoirs that I've read, The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls and Educated by Tara Westover. Both of those are memoirs, like I said, so they're nonfiction, about very unconventional families, and that's also this book so far. We are just learning about Betty's family. It's historical, so we're set in like the 1960s. Specifically, this is reminding me of The Glass Castle because the family is moving around a lot, and I think they finally just planted roots in Ohio, but it was very interesting reading about them moving from place to place. This family has a bunch of children, and then an added element in here is that this family is Cherokee, so they are also encountering racist people and racial issues that are making their lives that much harder. So I'm interested to see where this goes. I'm hoping it picks up a little and I come to care about the characters a little bit more. So far, they're just pretty unlikable, at least the parents so far. Like, I can tell they mean well for their children, but their actions do not lead to great lives for their children. So we will see. I'm going to dive back into this book tonight. I will be back when I'm either further into this book or possibly have finished it, and we'll give you some more thoughts about how I'm enjoying this book and if I'm loving it as much as Kat did. Okay, you guys, bad news. This video is going completely off the rails. We are in a fast downward spiral and I need to do something fast to fix it because I'm not having a good time. But okay, let's talk about one thing at a time. The first bad news that I have is that I am going to DNF Betty. I did make it over halfway. I'm on page 304 out of almost 500 pages, so we're like 65% in. So I feel like I gave this a good chance. I've read basically a full book's worth of this book, and I just don't think it's for me. And I want to be very clear that that is because of me and my reading tastes. I don't think that this is a bad book by any means. I just think by this point, I know what the book is, and I don't think I'm gonna get anything else out of it. So the main reason that I am DNFing this is because this is basically Betty's life story. Even at the beginning, we get a little bit before her life because we get some backstory about her parents, but then it's literally just Betty growing up with her parents and her siblings and like everything good and bad that they go through. And it's just very meandering and like there's no point to it other than telling the story of her life. And I have never resonated with those types of books. I don't know why, but I don't like reading about a character's whole life story if there's not like a big event or something that is like grounding the story. And this is inspired by the author's mother's life, so it's a little hard to know what in here is actually true, where was creative liberty taken. But even so, even if I knew those answers, I still wouldn't care, and that may make me a bad person, but I think I just have to accept that. I'm dreading the idea of reading 200 more pages about this story, so I think it's just not for me. But this book has great reviews and ratings on Goodreads, and again, it's Kat's favorite book of the year so far, so it resonated with her, and I'm so glad about that, and I want other people to pick it up if the type of story sounds like something you typically like. I'm so sad it's not for me, and I feel conflicted as a person because I typically really enjoy historical fiction. This is just the type that I don't. I'm gonna go ahead and take my bookmark out. I'm sad about it, but I'm ready to let it go. Kat, if you're watching this, I am sorry. But you know what? If I were to look at your general reading taste, honestly, other than this one historical fiction, I don't think we have that similar of a reading taste anyway. You read a lot of weird horror and I really don't like weird horror. So maybe we are just opposite reading tastes, and that's okay. I will flip this, and maybe in the future, if you ever don't recommend a book or don't like a book, I will take that as a sign that maybe I will like that book, which is fine. But anyway, that brings me to my next piece of bad news, which is that I barely started the audiobook of Whispers and the Roars, and we're talking like 5% into this book, and I can also tell that this one is wildly not for me. And this one I should have known. I was in denial, but there are just many things about this book that are rubbing me the wrong way off the bat. First of all, the audiobook narration. There are two narrators. There's a male and a female for the two main characters. And it's an interesting way of being narrated because within a chapter, even if it's being told in, say, the female's perspective, whenever the guy talks, it's the male narrator. So it's a lot of back and forth between the two narrators, and I don't think it's poorly done or anything. I don't love it. I would rather have the female narrator say the man's words just so it's less jarring and I can remember like, okay, we're in her perspective right now. So that's a minor thing, but something that was kind of annoying to me off the bat. And then this book is just cringy in so many ways. And I don't read a lot of romance, so maybe it's not to most people, but to me, like the red flags about the guy in this book, he's just, I don't even think I got far enough in to know the general plot of the book, but from what I gathered, this couple was together for a long time, like 8 years or something. And then they broke up, and I think the guy moved away for a period of time, and she told him like, date other girls, do what you have to do to be happy. Of course he never did because she's his true love or whatever. And then now he's moving back and he's like, I'm gonna get my girl back. I know she doesn't want me right now, but it doesn't matter, we're meant to be. Like, she doesn't want to talk to me, but I will make her love me again. And it just feels to me like he thinks he owns her, and I don't like it. I don't think I'm gonna like this book at all. I don't think it's worth finding out like the major twist. So if anyone has read this book and just wants to spoil me like on Instagram or something, send me a message, let me know what happens so I can be in the know, but I don't have to put myself through listening to this book. So because I like did not read that book at all, I'm not considering that even an attempt at this video. And so now I'm like, crap. 2 books out of 4 I've started and not finished. So like, where is this video going? So I figured I would make one late addition. So I'm gonna add another book to my TBR. And I like the idea, I wanna continue with the idea of taking somebody's bad rating and bad review and feeling like I could still enjoy that book, even with those things in mind. And so we are going to go with my friend Jan, who recently did a whole video about her reading Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and she did not like this book, but I think I'm still going to. The reasons that Jan didn't like this book, I believe, are number 1, because it sounds like it's pretty heavy in the tennis talk. Carrie Soto is a tennis player and she's basically coming out of retirement to try and reclaim her title or something. And I guess there's just a lot of tennis like matches that are actually described in the book, and like the volleys and the scoring. Jan thought that was annoying. I think I would like that. I actually like when sports are included in books, and I like when characters are so passionate about a thing, whatever that thing is, that it's their life. So if Carrie Soto is just all in on tennis and constantly talking about tennis, I actually think I might like that. And I'm not even a tennis player or anything. And otherwise, Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors. So I think I'm set up for success to enjoy this book. So that is going to be on my TBR now for this video. I'm sorry that this is a mess. I'm considering scrapping this vlog altogether. And if I have one more DNF, I probably will, but we're gonna try to salvage it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually get started on Carrie Soto Is Back. I'm gonna save The Girl in 6E and Any Man for later because I feel like those are both pretty dark books, and I'm just in the mood for something like fast and light, which I'm sure Carrie Soto is going to have some emotional elements, but I just want to read about people playing tennis, okay? So I'm gonna put on this audiobook and I will be back once I'm a little bit into it, hopefully with good thoughts, hopefully saying I'm loving it, and let's salvage this video together, okay? Okay. Okay, it is a bit later the same day. I have been listening to Carrie Soto. Thoughts on that in a second. I also took a little lunch break trip to the library because I needed to pick up some books for my next reading vlog. I also picked up a physical version of Any Man because they happened to have it available, and I thought this would be a good one to read also physically for this video because it looks to be written in a really interesting way where like there are pages with really little text on it, there are like little doodles and illustrations. So I think it'll be a good one to have physically as well as listen to the audio. So I'm very excited to get into this book. But let's talk about Carrie Soto. I am 16% of the way in and I am loving it, you guys. And let me say that this is exactly the type of book that I would love. It's very specific to tennis, which on one hand, I want to say is interesting that Taylor Jenkins Reid would write a book that's so hyper-focused on tennis. But then again, I think about her most recent releases, and they've all been about people who are at the very top of their industry. Like with Evelyn Hugo, it's about a movie star eclipsing Hollywood. Daisy Jones and the Six, it's about the music industry. Malibu Rising, the family is like the best surfers in the world. So it really shouldn't be surprising that she is now tackling athletics. And this story is about somebody who wants to be the best athlete in the world. The entire book that I've read so far has been about her childhood, growing up, learning to play tennis. Her dad was a player and then a coach, so he taught her to play tennis really early on. She showed a natural ability, and so naturally she has strove to be the best player. And now we're into her ages like 18 to 20, where she is now tipping into not just being the best childhood tennis player ever, but striving to be the best adult tennis player ever. And that is dictating her every day, every decision. Like, she is so hyper focused on being the best tennis player that pretty much every other aspect of her life is floundering. She's also not particularly nice, which I think is very interesting and definitely leads to the conversations of like entitlement, because she does read as feeling entitled to being the best tennis player in the world. And when she has success early on, she thinks that that means it'll just be, you know, an easy walk in the park to continue having this success into her adulthood. And I actually think that's very relatable. Like, I am nowhere near that level of athlete, but I do know the feeling of having success on a small scale at something and being like, all right, what's next? Who can I beat next? You know, what's the ladder to large scale success? And I don't think it's that unlikely that a solo sport like tennis would lead to an inflated sense of self if you see nothing but success early on. And yes, she does come off as a little entitled. She comes off as very immature, but at this point she is literally immature. She is not a mature adult, so she does things without thinking. She says things to her dad, who is her coach, without thinking, and that come off as really harsh and rude. And I'm just interested to see how that continues to shape her life and how people continue to treat her. I also think there's a little bit of the element of like, men can have success and it doesn't really matter if they're nice or appreciative or smile in interviews and stuff like that. But of course, when there's a successful female, they not only have to be the best, but they also have to be the nicest and the most gracious. And so I'm sure that Taylor Jenkins Reid is purposely making her not that. And I enjoy that. So far I'm liking it. It is so much tennis, but I like it. So overall, happy to report that I'm having much better luck with this book than the previous two books I attempted for this video. I hope that that continues on, but either way, I'll let you know when I'm further in the book or maybe have finished it to give you my overall review of Carrie Soto is Back. Okay, good news. I finished Carrie Soto is Back today, and you guys, I really liked it. I'm so curious to hear other people's reviews of this book once it comes out, because in a way it's very different from anything Taylor Jenkins Reid has ever done before. It's so sports focused that part of me is like, she's gonna lose a lot of her audience. They're not gonna connect with this type of writing. But then the other part of me is like, well, look at the rest of her backlist, and every book I feel like is so different for Taylor Jenkins Reid, and yet I feel like she does it well every time. So in that way, it's not a surprise. But yeah, just to kind of echo my thoughts from earlier, this book is very, very tennis heavy. And so I know most fans of Taylor Jenkins Reid are going to pick this book up regardless of what it's about, but I feel like it's worth putting that out there, because if you don't think you're going to enjoy reading about basically every major match that Carrie Soto competes in, point by point, and have detailed descriptions of what the ball is doing and what each player is doing and how the strategy is changing point by point, minute by minute, then you're not going to enjoy like 75% of this book. So if you want to skip it, that's fine. The other 25% of the book, I would say, is really strong father-daughter relationship, and then there is a little bit of a romantic element. There's also like 1% of the book that's tying into other books, which I find fun, but I also am glad that it's just like one line here and there. It didn't spend too much time trying to be like, hey, remember I wrote this other book with these other characters? It was just like, if you catch it, you catch it. If you don't, nothing hurt. But yeah, other than that, I just thought it was really entertaining. I am a big fan of sports in general, watching actual sports as well as fictional sports movies. I find them entertaining. I love to know the nitty-gritty details, play-by-plays, things like that. So I enjoyed all of that. And more than anything, I just liked how focused Carrie was. She had her goal, and whether you agreed with her or not, she knew what she was setting out to do with her life. She knew every step of the way what was the next step in getting there, and I love reading about somebody just with that much passion and knowledge about what it is they do. And I think that's kind of the differentiator between this book and Betty. They're very different in many ways, but like I mentioned, Betty was this life story of this girl who grew up in this family, and it was just meandering tales about her childhood and her family's lives, but they had no like objective or no major event that they were like striving towards or that shaped their lives. Whereas Carrie Soto, we didn't get her whole entire life, but we got her well into her late 30s, all the way from childhood, and she had one goal. And I think that's just what I connected to. I was tuned in to her goal. I was like, yep, we're gonna do this, girl. And so I think that's why this type of life story worked for me better than Betty. So hopefully that helps those of you who are debating whether or not to pick Carrie Soto up. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars. The only thing I was missing was like one twist or reveal or something that turned this into more than just a tennis book. And I don't know if I would have expected that if this was written by any author other than Taylor Jenkins Reid, but I just think of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones, where like you're not necessarily expecting a twist or something that changes the rest of the story that you just got done reading, but it came and it hit you that much harder because you weren't expecting it. And then in this one, I was like expecting that and it didn't quite happen. So I think that's just my own personal preconceived notions or wishes for this book, and that's the only reason I'm giving it 4 stars instead of 5. So I'm so excited for that book to be a 4-star book and to have Jan's, not really recommendation, but Jan's book be such a success. I even commented on her video where she reviewed this book. I was like, everything you're saying is making me think I'm gonna really like it. So the next book I think I'm going to go ahead and get into is Any Man. The audio for this is only about 4 hours long, again because many pages are just like a few lines. So an already short book is made that much shorter. So I'm gonna go ahead and start listening to the audiobook along with reading the physical book. My friend Jessie's reading sprints start in just a couple of minutes on Reading with Jess. She does sprints every Monday night, so I'm going to tune into those and I will let you know when I have some thoughts to share on this book. Hopefully I don't just breeze through the whole thing without checking in, but I will do my best. I'll just let you know when I have something to say. Okay, good morning. It is actually a couple days later and I have some updates. Last night I finished Any Man by Amber Tamblin. This book is a wild, wild book. It's a doozy. It's very dark, very disturbing, and it's the type of book that it's very short. It's less than 300 pages, and again, many of the pages are like a single line of text. So physically it reads really fast. The audiobook is like 4 hours in length, and so if you speed that up at all, it's very short. But it was a book I didn't want to speed through. There are very hard-hitting topics in here, and there's some very difficult subject matter to stomach, and so I really don't think it's the type of book to like rush through and to put on a TBR if you're just trying to get through as many books as possible. I think this is one you're going to want to resonate with and give like the full amount of time that you would give to a longer novel, if that makes sense. I am so glad that I had the physical version as well as the audio. The audio is very well produced. There are a whole bunch of voice actors, also real actors, like Ryan Reynolds is one of the voices. So every perspective in the book has a different narrator. There are some parts of the book that sound like interviews or like podcast or radio shows. Amber Tamblin is the like villain narrator, which I thought was fun. And overall, the audio was very well done and enjoyable to listen to. But I'm also glad that I had the physical because the way that it's written, some pages, it was nice to see where there were large gaps in the writing because the audio didn't necessarily pause for that long of a time, but it adds more impact when you know that there are like large page breaks between some of the text, if that makes sense. So I know it's not the most accessible, but I would highly recommend reading both versions at the same time if you have access to them. So now let's get into the content of the book. Obviously, it is extremely disturbing. This book goes into detail about what was done to these men, and it's not pretty. That's obviously to evoke a reaction from the reader, so I get it, but it's definitely not my favorite content to read. It takes a lot out of you when you read that type of material. Very strong trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault. And then as I've been thinking about this book, I think the closest book that I would actually relate it to is Notes on an Execution by, actually I have the book right here. Notes on an Execution by Danyan Kukafka. I read this very recently as part of Jan's Full Moon Readathon, so I will link that blog if for some reason you missed it and are interested in my thoughts on this book. But this is about a man who's being sentenced to death for killing multiple women, and it's interesting because it's actually more about the women involved in his life and his relationships with them and how they ultimately came to be his victims, but much more about their lives and experiences. Whereas again, Any Man is similar in that we're following the male victims of this female serial rapist. And I found it to again be a very interesting perspective that we're not focusing on the perpetrator here, we're focusing on the victims. This one is much more focused on the aftermath of what happened, whereas obviously we can't follow women's lives who have already been murdered, but we can follow these men after they have been attacked and see how it impacts their lives, see how everyone around them reacts to the incidents happening. This book definitely does go into people's reactions to males being the ones sexually assaulted and into that frenzy and that conversation of like, can that even happen? Like, how could a man be raped? You know, definitely a lot to think about. Very outside my comfort zone. I'm glad I read it, but at the same time, this isn't the type of book that I want to read all the time. It was definitely one that I had to sit for a while after finishing. I actually finished this book. I was on sprints last night on Naomi's channel with a couple other friends, which was really fun. And I finished this book during the first sprint, and I finished it with like 15 minutes left in the sprint, and I ended up not picking up my next book. I was just sitting for a little bit, absorbing, checking social media and stuff because I wasn't ready to dive right into another story right after finishing this one. So my rating is 3 stars, which feels a little harsh. Maybe it's a little bit closer to a 4-star in my head. It's just hard to say this is a great book, you know what I mean? And I think even Elizabeth probably knows what I mean because you gave this 5 stars, but you're like, it's a lot. So I might ruminate a little bit more, but overall not my favorite book of all time and not one that I would super widely recommend, but one that I am glad to have read. And I think that if it gets introduced to the right person, it could be very impactful to them, open some eyes, or give some relatability to other people that have been in similar situations and maybe been treated similarly. So after finishing that book and allowing myself to recover a little bit, I did pick up my last book for this video. I started The Girl in 6E by Torre, and I didn't realize that this one was going to be also so dark right off the bat, or not even dark really, but like descriptive and graphic. So this book, if I didn't already give a synopsis, this is about our main character named something. I think her name is Deanna, but she goes by Jessica because she has an online presence. She is a cam girl and makes her living being on video, doing sexual things, and that is very descriptively told through the first few chapters of this book, because that is not only her livelihood, but it's literally what she spends most of her time doing, because she does not leave her apartment ever. She moved in like years ago and has never left the apartment, because if she does, she has the overwhelming urge to kill people. She has visions and fantasies of killing anyone that she comes in contact with, so she doesn't even give herself that opportunity. She locks herself in her apartment. It's very interesting getting her perspective not only on what she does for work, but then also these fantasies about killing people. She talks about having 2 separate therapists who she talks to virtually, of course, but she has to like even separate those 2 things herself because it's too much for one therapist to take on. So I am currently 70 pages into this book and I'm interested. Like, again, this is a very interesting character, so I want to know more about her, but nothing has happened yet in the book to spur like a mystery or a thriller or, you know, any kind of objective. Nothing has happened. We're just getting backstory. So I'm interested to get into the actual thick of the story, have something happen, whether it's her murdering somebody or something else happening that she has to maybe leave her apartment for. I don't know, but it's reading really quickly. The chapters are really short and the margins are really big in the book. So last night on sprints, I was able to read more than a page a minute, which for me is fast. So I do hope to fly through this book as well and be able to give some more thoughts later on or once I've finished about what exactly is going to happen in this book and whether I end up liking it. Okay, you guys, several days later, and this video has gone completely unaccording to plan, or has completely defied my expectations for which books I thought I was gonna love and which books I didn't. Because I have now finished The Girl in 6E, and I am giving this a generous 2 stars. Like, part of me wants to give it 1 star, but I'll get into why it's 2 stars. Before I do, I did just include footage when I got to go to an event at my local library where Karen Slaughter was speaking. They did like a Q&A event with her and book signing, and that was really fun. I got there early so that I could get a good spot, and I got a little bit of reading in while I was waiting, and I really enjoyed it. I know Karen Slaughter is not in this video at all, but I just wanted to say that she is a really cool person. Her speaking was just very casual and like open and honest. She threw the F-bomb multiple times and was talking about sex and things in her books, and I just thought it was a very fun, open conversation with her. So that was fun. I did get a book signed, actually not for me, but I sent it to my friend Beth at Beth's All Booked. She should have gotten that package before this video goes up, so hopefully I'm not spoiling anything, but I figured she would appreciate a signed book more than I would, just because Karen Slaughter isn't my favorite author of all time, but I didn't want to waste the opportunity of having her sign a book and someone appreciating it. With all that said, let's get into The Girl in 6E. So the setup of me reading this book, again, I'm reading this on Jacqueline's kind of anti-recommendation. She did not like this book. Let me go back and find what exactly she didn't like about it that made me think I would like it. Because again, I often like thrillers that Jacqueline hates. Okay, unrealistic ending. I agree with that. Usually I don't have a problem with suspending my disbelief, but I will get into that in a second. Then let me see if there were other reasons. Okay, that might be it. So that actually wasn't that much to go off of in terms of a reason I would enjoy this book that Jacqueline didn't. But the fact of the matter is, I did not enjoy this. She did not enjoy this, but a lot of people enjoy this book. And this book is interesting because for like 170 pages, there's no mystery. There's no objective. There's nothing. We are just reading about this girl's day-to-day life and like her very strange urges and impulses. And while that's interesting, I was spending that whole time being like, okay, but what is the point? What is she going to find out? Or what is her going to trigger her wanting to do something? Or what is she going to get herself into the middle of that she has to get out of? Like something has to happen in this book to make for a plot. And that took a very long time. There were a few chapters throughout the beginning of the book that were different perspectives that you knew were going to tie in somehow, but again, didn't lead to any sort of plot or anything. So then once we finally do get into what's the point of the book, like a crime happened and our girl, because of her line of work and the people she talks to, was able to kind of solve what was happening, and so she wanted to go pursue it. But obviously she has the internal struggle because she doesn't want to kill people on the way of solving this crime. So that's fairly interesting, but on her way of going to do that thing, I kept waiting for things to come up as conflicts as she was setting out to do the thing she wanted to do, and she encountered basically no resistance. I kept thinking, oh, another car is gonna pull up and like try to interrupt her, or like, oh, this struggle she's about to have is going to go poorly for her. But that just never happened. She just kept doing what she was gonna do, and the only struggle she was having was internal, which maybe was intentional, but to me just wasn't very thrilling or suspenseful because nothing was standing in her way, I guess, except for herself. And I just didn't find that interesting, and I think that's also the piece that other people don't find realistic, because it's hard to put yourself in this character's mind and like relate to her in any way because she is just so extreme with her impulses. What I also was missing in this book is something that I have read in another A.R. Torre book. This year I read The Good Lie, and that was about a serial killer who would abduct teenage boys and basically torture them for a while and then eventually kill them, and their bodies are all being discovered and they all have like a signature thing happen to them that denotes to the police and everyone that it's the same person killing all of them. And that book, what it did really well was string along puzzle pieces that all clearly came together at the end. So I was hoping and assuming that this book would be more smartly crafted and like more things would tie in later on to make it more satisfying of a conclusion. And I did not get that at all. This book was very linear and very basic. There was one note. There were no red herrings or anything. It was just what happened, and you either find that interesting or not. I just didn't find it particularly interesting. So that is a huge bummer to me, and I've been looking on Goodreads and a lot of people really enjoyed this book and have been giving it really good ratings. I guess the overall rating isn't great, it's like a 3.8 or something, but the majority of my friends' ratings are 4 and 5 stars, which I am super happy for them about. I can see that this is a very unique thriller and I've never read anything like it, that's for sure. So I can see how that would be really satisfying for people to read something that is unlike they've ever read and that did really thrill and surprise them. It just didn't do it for me, so I'm gonna give it 2 stars. Jacqueline also gave it 2 stars, so I am hugely surprised that we did have similar feelings about this book given our differences in thriller preferences in the past and given all of the good ratings that this book has gotten. I thought I would be in that majority here, but you live and you learn. I have learned a lot from this video. This book also does have 2 other books in the series. I definitely don't think I will be reading those. I don't think I will be keeping my copy of this book. So disappointing, but glad I included it as part of this experience, I guess. Man, you guys, interesting results for this video. I read 4 books. Obviously I DNF'd one. One of them I don't have because I listened to it completely on audio. But let's just recap, shall we? So Whispers and the Roars, didn't even attempt. Not my kind of book. Can't give any commentary about it or how my tastes align with Kayla's or anything like that. Betty, a huge surprise. I was hoping and expecting to love it. It is historical fiction, which I don't typically dislike. I just found it way too long and meandering. So Kat, I unfortunately disagree with your high rating of this book and am shocked and disappointed by that because I was expecting to love it as much as you did. We had Any Man by Amber Tamblin, recommended by Elizabeth from Reading Riley. She loved this book and I can understand that love. I didn't quite meet it. I ended up giving it 3 stars because it was just not the perfect book for me, but I do appreciate that it is getting some love and attention within the community now, and do think it will be impactful for the perfect reader. So Elizabeth, I don't necessarily completely agree with your rating, but I understand it and I trust you with your book ratings and recommendations. Carrie Soto is back. I read because Jan rated it low and I thought I would disagree with her, and I did. I really liked this book a lot, and I think that everything Jan said is accurate and correct, and I understand why she didn't like it for those reasons, but I'm glad I was able to identify those as things that I do like in books and still give it my fair chance. So that one was 4 stars, and then of course The Girl in 6E, I gave it 2 stars. Jacqueline gave it 2 stars. I thought I would like it more than her, but I ended up not. So in this case, we are on the same page, which is a surprise. So all in all, I hope that that was somewhat entertaining. I don't know what I really got out of doing this video. I thought I would solidify my sense of self and my trust in myself to know when I can trust people's ratings and think I'll agree with them, or know I'll disagree with them and be correct about it. But that didn't really happen. We ended up with a complete mixed bag. So I guess I have to go back to the drawing board. I have to keep testing my own book preferences and tastes and where I get recommendations and stuff like that. But let me know if you've read any of the books in this video and what your thoughts were, whether you agreed with me or agreed with the original recommender or had a completely different opinion from both of us. That would certainly be interesting to hear. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.